Caledonian McBrain and the Big Light present
Welcome to Scottish Island Adventures. I'm Tony Kearney. My family home is on the island of Barra, and I love Scotland's west coast islands. Their people, wildlife, and history. In this season of the show, we're welcoming guests who will help you get the most out of your next visit to the Western Isles. Now, we've talked about the history of the great ships, the adrenaline of the hills, and the drama of the wildlife. But there's another reason people have been crossing the Minch for generations. It's something harder to pin down, but you feel it the moment the ferry's engines cut out at the pier. It's the silence. Not an empty silence, but a full one. In a world that's constantly screaming for our attention, pinging in our pockets, flashing on our screens, Scotland's Western Isles offer a rare commodity, the chance to be still. It's a place where wellness isn't a luxury retreat or a fancy green juice. It's the salt on your skin, the wind in your hair, and the realisation that the world didn't just end because you haven't checked your emails for hours. Well, to help us find the heart of this Hebridean reset, I'm joined by one of Scotland's best-loved yogis. He's an expert at finding the magic in the quiet corners of our coast, and he does it all while looking great and wearing a kilt. I'm delighted to welcome Finlay Wilson, the Kilted Yogi, to the show. Hi, Finlay. How are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've got lots to chat about, Finlay. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, when you're on a Calmac ferry and you know you're off to the Western Isles and you see the hills and then you see the jetty looming, is that the moment that you kind of feel your blood pressure dropping off and you're starting to reset?
So ever since I was a wee boy, the thing that I've always been drawn to, I will always either sit by the window or sit outside. And I'm always looking in the water because one of the first times when we were young, we took a ferry over to Iona, and I remember seeing basking sharks in the water. And so kind of since then, my thing is like, it's that switch straight away from like mechanical to nature spotting straight away. And it's wonderful. I think the last time that we went to Stornoway, we got to see dolphins as well, which was just wonderful.
Wow.
And I always really like pointing out to people that are like on their phone, being like, oh, by the way, there's dolphins right there if you're interested.
So for you then, the reset is starting at the ferry journey. That's the point of access for you, that you're leaving the city behind and you're kind of, you're hitting the reset button on that journey.
It's like an important part of the ritual. It's the vehicle that takes you to somewhere else. So it is an important part of that. And you literally step off the ferry onto perhaps lands that you've not been to. So it's an important part of that. So it's almost like how meditation is a way that you can, meditation is the vehicle to take your consciousness somewhere else. The ferry is the way to do the same.
Nicely put. I agree, 100%. Well, Finlay, you're renowned for, iconic kilted yoga sessions in the Scottish wilderness, and you've often spoken about how yoga shouldn't be preachy or elitist in any way, but on the islands it kind of feels accidental, doesn't it? It's kind of found in the wind or it's found in the heather. How would you describe the difference between a traditional yoga session in a studio and the wild yoga that you might practice, say, on a beach in Harris?
So this is one of the things that we try and get across to people when they come to our studio. And we usually say, to the point that it sometimes sounds a bit cliched, that your practice happens like the moment that you step off of the mat. So yes, there are poses, but awareness of both your internal and external environment are a big part of the meditative shift that you're meant to have when you're taking on a yoga practice. The poses actually make up a very small element of what we're doing, the way that you move in the world, the way that you interact with it. So for example, like doing no harm, if you take that to like the outdoor code, then actually it lines up really, really nicely. And this is one of the things, like the outdoors is accessible to anyone. You know, in Scotland, we're really fortunate that we can pretty much go anywhere, and kind of take comfort in it and get something from it. And the studio that we run, like, one of our aims, we operate as a charity. We are trying to get more people doing it, so that this idea of like the elitist nature of it is not that. We're trying to like decommercialize it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, it totally does make sense, and it's that kind of sensory hit that you get, you know, when you immerse yourself in the outdoors as well. If there was one specific sensory hit for you, you know, that acts as a kind of psychological switch off for you when you visit the islands, what would you say it is? You know, I'm thinking of, you know, sometimes the smell of peat, or the sound of the macher. For me, when I go home to my family home in Barra, it's getting my bare feet on the sand and in the water. That's what gives me that hit. What about you?
I have spent my life kind of growing up next to rivers and bodies of water. It's where I'm at my most comfortable. And so for me, when I set forth onto the island, there's usually a very specific change in the smell in the air. And I feel like I'm really attuned to it. So as soon as there's like a slight salt spray, like that tactile sensation and the smell, those like immediately kind of take me right to a place of like calm and comfort, this idea of like a homecoming. Even though it's mostly like fresh water that I'm around, like that salt water is, there's just something about it. We use this, if you've ever done like a meditation where you're told to like consider like your like safe space or your idea of sanctuary, the idea is that you're meant to use each of your senses to essentially put like the path, like it creates the bridge. And so for me, like the main bridge for me to that place of like well-being is that kind of like salt water or water spray and that smell in the air.
Yeah, and it's trying to find that kind of sense of joy in our lives, because we're all trying to feel better in life, aren't we? Whether it's yoga or whether it's open water swimming. So, Finlay, for people who are listening who maybe feel a little bit stuck or cramped in their daily routine, what do you think it is about the kind of massive Hebridean horizons that help people put kind of life's problems into the box, or certainly put them into perspective for a while?
I think it's just when you start looking at scale, if you're living in a town or a city, like everything that you need is within a relatively short period of time. So you end up having to cram like lots into your day to have to like just do like the basic functions. Whereas whenever I've been on the islands, like if you know that the nearest supermarket is like 30 miles away down a single track road, then you will kind of organize a little bit better. And I think that ends up giving you, if you're there like not for work, you kind of end up with like a little bit more time and are able to make a better shift of how you prioritize your time. So it's like the lens kind of opens up a little bit. For me, it's also just like this idea of space. Like I'm fortunate in Dundee, like I don't feel cramped. But if I go to London, it's totally overwhelming. I can't stand it personally. And I avoid it as much as I can avoid it. But when I go to the islands or open countryside, the openness and vastness kind of reminds you of like the smallness of yourself, but in a comforting way. Whereas like in London, because it's so busy and frantic, that smallness is so anonymous and disconnected that it feels almost damaging.
I love that you've mentioned the whole concept of time, Finlay, because when I'm home in the islands, I take my watch off, and I'm wondering, you know, you're a busy guy. I'm wondering how much of a challenge is it for a busy person like you to actually surrender to that pace and maybe stop checking your watch, because we're on island time now.
I am infinitely better at it than my other half, that's for sure. I've always kind of gotten up kind of at like 6 or 7 and I start my day kind of from the first step. I'm not like a groggy starter. I'm like, as soon as I'm up and in a bit of a psychotic way, I'm like singing. And I'm singing to my partner, being like, it's raining. And we've got to take this dog out. I'm very much a morning person, and for that, it kind of makes my day stretch eternal. So for me, like if I step into island time, I'm just like, actually, this is great. I just have less to do, which is nice.
I love that concept. So where are you then with the whole patchy phone signal? Because, you know, let's face it, the islands are renowned and famous for patchy phone signals here and there, and you can see yourself standing in a chair at the window and all that. However, if we flip that, maybe that's something that we could kind of surrender to. So I'm thinking about yourself, your career is so tied to the digital world. Is that lack of signal for you something to be managed, or is it actually the most vital wellness feature, perhaps, that the islands have to offer, Finlay?
So, I mean, thinking of like the experience I have like teaching classes, like we have a really hard time even getting our clients to not have their phone on their mat or not try and answer a message on their like smartwatch. It's painful. And I'm like, are you actually texting somebody right now? It's just ridiculous. For me, like we live in like a really old house, and our house is like the thick walls. Your phone doesn't work in here unless you're using Wi-Fi, and it's great. And as much as I do post on social media, I have my phone on Do Not Disturb all day, because the people that I need to hear from, like if they want to hear from, like to see me, they will come and see me. It's fab. So I think maybe I've just accidentally adopted it like as like my de facto setting. It's like, I don't have signal, sorry.
Fair enough. Right, we've talked a little bit about water, and both like to get our toes in the water and feel the salt water on our skin. I mean, it goes without saying that you're certainly no stranger to the elements. Have you been brave enough to kind of take your kilt off, or keep it on even, and kind of just go for a proper duke, go right in there in the ocean for some wild swimming?
I certainly have. I'm an avid paddleboarder, and I've paddleboarded in some like pretty cold Scottish locations in the depths of winter. One of the ridiculous things kind of when I'm posting photographs, or if I'm doing things for like calendars and books, is either the organizations or companies that are hiring me say, we don't want Scotland to look lush, green and summery. We want it to look like dark, foreboding and wintry. So most of my stuff happens in winter. So I'm usually freezing. And one of the last videos that we did, I was like up to my waist in a bog. Just holding my kilt up a wee bit. And so I'm actually familiar with being cold pretty much all the time, but like getting in the water, that's a slightly different thing.
It certainly is. Is there kind of a glow then that you can get from a yoga session in the rain and the wind that you perhaps can't get from the sun?
I mean, admittedly, if I was leading a class and people were showing up voluntarily, I guarantee they'd have a much nicer time if it was sunny. But if I'm out, there's something, when people see like the sun on my skin and like a gorgeous landscape, it does bring like a tranquil nature. But online, people react more if it's wet and windy and just looking foreboding. And for me, certainly, it's very invigorating. Usually behind the camera, you can't see, is my twin brother usually like screaming because the wind is like cutting us to ribbons. But usually if we then like get in the car after that, we're usually like giggling, bright red, and yeah, let's call it invigorated.
And the thing about the Scottish Islands is you're going to have 3 climates in the one day, so you've just got to embrace it all. Right, let's pick one active island memory, Finlay. I'm thinking maybe a specific cliffside walk or through a glen, something that felt like a total physical and mental reset for you, Finlay. If you had to pick, where would it be, and what did it feel like?
So a little bit of backstory. Like I have got a degree in classical studies, so archaeology and history was like a big part of what I'm very interested in. And there is something about, so when I was last in Shetland, I know we were saying about weather. Last time I was in Shetland, I had 5 days of unadulterated sunshine, not a cloud in the sky, unheard of.
Wow.
The locals are saying, please don't tell people it's like this, because it's not like this. And I actually spent time going around like different archaeological locations and visiting like the Broch and some of like the Bronze Age settlements. And there's just something about setting foot into something like, I was trying to explain it to the clerk that was there, who maybe wasn't as interested as I was, because I was like fully excited. And I was trying to explain to them, you do realize like Roman civilization was at this point, and this was like so much further back than that. We're talking like between like 3,000 and 6,000 years ago. This is exciting. And there's just something about walking through settlements like that are so connected, like an echo through time and that you're walking in the same place. I'm wondering if some of your genealogy is like mixed in there somewhere. It's, it's just, there's just something wonderful about it.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah. And then even going through like old settlements and stuff, from 100 or 200 years ago and the old ruins of the thatched houses. And it just brings the whole history alive of the people who have lived on these incredible islands.
Well, I always find sometimes like it's really surprising to me sometimes that even like Scottish history that people don't necessarily know, like speaking to people about like the clearances.
Yes.
And I'm trying to say, like, this is not a small, insignificant thing. It's very convenient that nobody talks about it. But, like, when you're walking through that glen, almost anywhere in Scotland, and you see these ruins, like, these are people's lives. These could be distant relatives of yours.
That's so interesting. Let's talk about the people, because a big part of mental health is connection with people. Do you find that a simple chat with someone who's living on the islands full time, a local, to use that term, maybe in a village shop, does that provide some kind of social wellness as well, Finlay, that maybe we're missing from our anonymous lives in the city?
It's one of these things. So I think with like the boom of tourism, I always like if I'm like in a local shop to kind of go in and let them hear my accent, knowing that it's a little bit different, but also reminding them that I'm Scottish and to kind of like, play nice. So I like to kind of go in and be like, I'm not going to be just here, like taking selfies and like disappearing. Like, I want to be part of this. I want to ask you advice. Like, if there's anything around here that you want me to experience, if there's anything you're like, if you don't get food from here, you're missing out. Like these people you're stepping into their life, not the other way around. And so you have to be, a conscientious visitor. So this is where like mindfulness isn't just like, oh, I'm going to sit down on this beach and, take 10 deep breaths. It's also like, are you, like I was saying earlier, how are you interacting with your outside world? Are you treating the folks on the island whose island you are on with respect and listening? I think this is where, like, when people start butting heads, like, like all the North Coast 500 stuff, like when you go to Skye and it's just chalk, I feel like we've lost a bit of that somewhere in these places.
And that connection, Finlay, can also give you that kind of sense of belonging, can't it? To part of the community, like you're saying, sharing knowledge, and you can feel that you can belong for a while.
Yeah, I'm a curious one. I ask particularly bizarre questions usually. So for example, I remember when we arrived on Mull and I had seen like a road sign, and it's the first time I'd seen a road sign that was like, watch out, there's otters, basically. And so I just went in and just started chatting to the person in the shop, being like, is this sign real? And they were like, yeah, actually. And then she said, like, if you cross over this road and go down to the wee burn that's kind of meeting the sea, if you look there, then that's where you're going to see them. And so like the sign itself wasn't saying, by the way, they're right here. But the local person was saying, if you are like looking around and are going to be careful, or if you're asking questions because you're genuinely interested in like the natural environment, you're not going to do any harm, then here's the information.
Second last question for you, Finlay. If you were writing a prescription for the soul for someone feeling completely burned out, someone who's in the city, really tired, really stressed, which island are you sending them to, and what's the first movement or task you'd tell them to do when they stepped off the ferry?
So I think, social prescription is something that we do quite often, and it can seem really simple, but a lot of people really forget to go outside and explore this concept of unplugging. And so obviously if you're setting foot on the island, you don't want to unplug your phone just yet until you get to like where you're going to be staying. So first things first, as soon as you kind of step off the ferry, I think it's a good idea just to orientate yourself with your surroundings. The last time I visited Stornoway, I knew where I was wanting to go, but then I also knew that Tesco wasn't going to be open on the Sunday. So I was like, right, it's Saturday, I'm getting my shopping in because they're not open tomorrow and I'm not used to that. So it's also like observing, like, what are the local customs? Are things open? What's going to be shut? Does it shut at 3? That sort of thing happens when it comes to island time. So it's I'm one for preparing. And I know that it may seem to be like the opposite direction, like if you're wanting to have an unplug that you need to prepare more, but it's in that preparation, in the details and preparation, you are then able to relax into ease and comfort. So for me, I would be like, as soon as you arrive on the island, get your provisions, get the things that you need, plan for a couple of days so that you can unplug. If I was to say like, where are you going to go? I think like when you arrive in Stornoway, you can go north and see some gorgeous white sand beaches. If that is what you're looking for, you can go south and you can go and see standing stones in the sunset. Like there is a bit of everything. You can drive to the west and cross over the bridge and kind of get towards mountains. There is an element for everyone there, whether it is time, space, whether it is mountain, air, water, fire. There is something for everybody there. And it becomes this like elemental alchemical magic. And I think that, like, who doesn't need that?
Oh, beautiful. We all need that. We all need that magic. So, talking about topping up that magic then, where's next, Finlay? Where is your next big Scottish island adventure?
So I either want to head out to Orkney because it's kind of on my bucket list, but also we've got a new dog, and my plan is to kind of get him out into Scotland on a ferry to see, mostly to see how that goes, and then up some hills. So he's not been up a hill yet, but that is the plan for this pup. Not that he knows that yet, but the plan is to take our pup Clyde all over Scotland.
I'm sure Clyde's going to love it. Finlay, it's been a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
That's all for this episode of Scottish Island Adventures. Please subscribe, like, rate and review and share with your friends. We'll be dropping new episodes every fortnight, full of great conversations with fantastic guests from the worlds of wellness, whisky, wildlife, heritage and more. In the next episode, we'll be joined by Moa Reynolds, the Swedish whisky girl, to talk about the many different ways you can enjoy Ushkebeta, the water of life, on the islands this year. Book your Caledonian McBrain Island adventure now. For show notes and more information on this and all my other island destinations, plus full details on Caledonian McBrain's routes, timetables, prices and bookings, go to calmac.co.uk. You've been listening to Scottish Island Adventures with me, Tony Kearney. It was written and produced by Michael Wilson Park, with engineering and mastering by Brian McAlpine for The Big Light, and executive producer was Fiona White.